dance, ballet, opera, classical music was nowhere to be seen. I got this audition at the Laban Centre, because I was 21 and 22 by the time I started, so they may have thought I'd missed the boat a bit, as a dancer. But I don't know what they saw. I wish there was a film of it. I mean, I'd love to know what on earth I did in that audition.
So, welcome, Sir Matthew Bourne, to this edition of Choreographer Conversations, where we delve a little bit deeper into your practice and also some of your history. And I always want to start with where you started to get interested in dance, when you just knew when that sort of thing existed in your youth.
Yes. So, I'm a Londoner. I'm a London boy. So I certainly had access to a lot of performance anyway, and I was very lucky to be have parents who loved theatre and movies. So from a very early age, we lived in Walthamstow, E17. From a very early age, they used to take me to see big movies, big reissues of big famous musicals like West Side Story, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. I remember seeing things like that. They used to be reissued around that time.
At the cinema? At
the cinema, yeah, on the big screen. In the days when there really were big screens, it was a single cinemas, and occasionally to the theatre as well, in the West End. But I would say usually to kind of variety kind of things at the Palladium, London Palladium, or West End musicals. They were probably my first sort of times that I saw dance, and I loved it. I mean, I loved the dance, but it to me it was part of a wider picture of a story, and it's an aspect of a musical. It's not the whole thing. And I suppose that gave me the bug in a way. And very quickly, like from a very early age, about 14 onwards, I was getting on a bus into the West End to go on my own to see plays and musicals and films. So I surprised myself recently because I'd been doing a little bit of research into my early theatre going and how young I was, and that was allowed to go on my own on the bus. How I afforded it, I don't know. I mean, I had pocket money, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. But actually, theatre tickets then in the upper circle gallery or whatever it was called, where I always sat, were 50p, 25p.
And was ballet part of that?
No. Ballet was not something that my parents knew anything about. It was a very musical household. We sang all the time. We had lots of music playing in the house. My mum and my dad and myself would sing top volume, would sing along to things. We had one LP of classical music, which was The Planets, Holst's The Planets. But otherwise it was all musical theatre and musical movies. And so it was kind of part of my life. But dance, ballet, opera, classical music was nowhere to be seen.
So when did you start to be interested in dance and therefore want to pursue it as a career?
Well, look, I already loved dance, but it's a different kind of dance. I was already putting on shows. I was always choreographing numbers for shows
at home?
From an early age. Yeah, I've always done it. I've always put on a show since about 4 or 5 onwards. Various forms, church hall, youth club. My parents were both youth workers, so I had access to a youth club to use space. I had access to space. So I'd form these little companies and put on shows. So it was sort of a part of my life. But I got to the age of 18. I left school at 18 and started work at the BBC. Was nothing glamorous. I was filing contracts. But I was sort of close to the world that I was sort of fascinated by. And I was sort of into self-education. I sometimes would read a book by someone I've never read before. It's like that sort of thing, I've never read a book by Jane Austen, I should read one. I've never seen an opera, I should go to one and see if I like it. And that was how I discovered ballet. I thought I should try one on my own. I thought, what's famous ballet? Swan Lake, heard of that one.
It was the first one.
It was the first one I saw.
There's a story there, isn't there?
There is, and it was right here at Sadler's Wells.
Which company?
Scottish Ballet, Peter Darrell's production. It was right. I literally was at the back row of the upper circle.
Wow.
And I remember that very well. And I'd had a couple of glasses of wine, if I remember rightly, beforehand. It all seemed like a sort of dream in the distance down there, but a wonderful one. You know, it was sort of glamorous, and I loved the fact it was a piece of history sort of preserved, and I loved the way the people moved. And I loved the fact they weren't speaking. You know, I thought I don't have to wait for the numbers, which is what I've been doing with musicals for quite a few years, you know, waiting for those numbers again. Things like a chorus line, which I loved, you know, but which I'd seen several years before. But it sounds naive to say it now, but the idea of dancing from beginning to end and telling a story was a new concept to me at that point.
Sure. So you ended up at Laban then as your first training.
Yeah, I did. I worked for about 4 years in different jobs around the West End, and one of which was working at the National Theatre, and I worked on the bookshop there and also ushering, and saw amazing productions for years. I mean, I saw the best theatre, I think, at that time. But also all my fellow ushers were trainee actors, singers, dancers. And I met someone who was the same age as me. By this point, I'm 21. And he was 21 as well, but he was training at the Place, the London Contemporary Dance School. And I thought, why am I not doing that? I'm doing all these little shows, these amateur shows and things, and I love it so much. And by this point, I was a regular at Sadler's Wells and at the Royal Opera House, seeing everything. Merce, Twyla, Macmillan, Ashton were the top ones that I loved. And I saw all these things, you know, regularly, like many times a week. So I knew a lot about dance from a viewing point of view. This guy was actually named Dan O'Neill. He was one of the Fanshaws.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah. And he said, well, why don't you do it? Why don't you go, give it a go? And I applied to audition for several places, and I got this audition at the Laban Centre, now called Trinity Laban. And it was the first dance class I'd ever done.
Wow.
I'd never done one before that.
So your audition was your first dance class?
It sounds crazy to say now, but it's true. I didn't know any formal way of dancing. Just what I'd seen and what I'd copied and what I'd learned from watching was what I'd done in these amateur things I'd done.
They must have spotted something, though, I guess.
Don't know what they spotted. I feel that they were very keen on having young men, for one thing.
Yes.
At the college. I think in my interview, they asked me what I'd seen lately, and of course the list never ended. I'd seen everything, and I'd read everything. I'd read all the autobiographies and biographies of famous dancers and companies, and I was obsessive, you know, and I'd seen everything many times, not just once. I'd seen things a lot. And so I was full of knowledge of dance. And I sort of think that they may have thought, oh, we've got a critic here or a writer, someone's going to write about dance, or, you know, because I was 21 and 22 by the time I started, so they may have thought I'd missed the boat a bit, you know, as a dancer. But I don't know what they saw. I wish there was a film of it. I mean, I'd love to know what on earth I did in that audition.
So then you left Laban and you started a company straight away, Adventures in Motion Pictures at the time.
Yes, but what happened was my fourth year at Laban was basically a company called Transitions, and it was one of the first or second years that they'd run that, and where they brought in choreographers from the outside to make work on a group of students that auditioned for that extra year, and we became a little company. And of course, some of the people that I worked with, they went on into the dance world, like Emma Gladstone, was one of my co-directors originally of Adventures in Motion Pictures, but she was one of my colleagues in Transitions, and we formed the company out of that. It kind of gave us the knowledge of what it was like to be in a small contemporary dance company and tour around the country a bit, which we did quite a lot of touring, and made some connections, with people, including yourself, Alistair.
Yes.
On those tours, we made some nice connections and got invited back eventually. We did our own work as well. We did our own choreography and formed this company directly from leaving Laban, which was a sort of collective originally of people who wanted to choreograph and wanted to perform. There were about 10 of us initially, and that whittled down a little bit eventually, but I was one of several choreographers.
And did you get an Arts Council grant or something? How did it work? Can you remember?
Well, no one would do what we did these days. No one would work for nothing these days. And why should they? But but we did it for nothing for a while. We all had part-time jobs. I was still working at the National Theatre right through my college years. I was still doing some evenings on the bookshop, and continued that into starting the company. And we couldn't really pay ourselves very well at all. Nothing. I mean, we were on unemployment benefit, or we were on a thing called the Enterprise Allowance Scheme, where we got £40 a week, I think, because we'd started our own company.
Yeah.
Which we were very grateful for at the time.
Yeah. Those are things that existed then, of course, and now it's much harder.
Much harder now, I imagine, which is why there's not so many small companies around, I guess. It was quite a thriving thing in those days. And we'd been buoyed on by the success of the Chumleys, Lee Anderson's company. Lee was in the year above me at Laban. And we'd seen what they'd done and going around pubs and little venues and creating this company, and we loved their work. It was very unique, very much her and her vision, and it was. I think we were encouraged by her more than anyone to start a company and think, well, we want to do that as well.
Yes, interesting. So if we fast forward, we have now the Red Shoes in our theatre.
Yes,
and I just wanted to talk to you about one of the themes that occurs in your work, and that's the cinema.
Yes,
and
very
the
much
clues
so.
in the name of your first company, Adventures in Motion Pictures, and it keeps coming up through your work. So the Carmen, Postman Always Rings Twice, Cinderella, Brief Encounter, Romeo and Juliet, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and so I guess this all came out of what you were saying earlier, that one of your first experiences in life was going to the cinema and in eating up, particularly some of those older films that have been influential.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, most shows have more than one, film influence in them, and sometimes they're there, and I don't even recognise it myself because the images are in my head somewhere, and someone else says, "Oh, it's a bit like that film," and I go, "Oh, yeah, of course." It's a great source of many things, many images, many stories, many characters, and also as I found with Red Shoes, great music. That film music is the most underused for dance. I mean, there's an incredible amount of wonderful film music which is only associated with a film, and most of our score for Red Shoes is from very famous films like Citizen Kane and The Ghost of Mrs. Muir and films by Bernard Herrmann. So it's always been an influence, sometimes more obvious than other times. Like people are always sort of surprised and then go, "Oh yes," when I say, "Oh, The Birds" is an influence on Swan Lake. Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, with those birds attacking for no apparent reason. This poor woman. But that's been those films have been an influence for a long time. And what I don't like is a recreation of a film on stage. I think you've got to make it into a piece of theatre, a piece of dance. And it's easy to say, "Oh, Red Shoes, it's just based on the film of the Red Shoes." But of course, there's only about a third, if that, dancing in the Red Shoes film. The rest of the story is acted and spoken. And so by making a dance piece from it, all those sections of the dramatic scenes between the main characters has to be danced as well. So it therefore creates quite a lot of nice duets and scenes between characters that aren't actually dancers in the piece, like the composer and Boris Lermontov and people like. So I think this is true of all the pieces. Cinderella has several influences, and it's you take something from that influence and feed it into the work, but it's you're never really recreating it, and that's the trick actually, is to use the inspiration but don't try and recreate it.
Yeah, and I guess that's best exemplified in Carman, because it's clearly that story of Post More Wings Twice, but actually probably people wouldn't necessarily pick up on that. Therefore, they went straight back and look at the film and said, "Oh yes, this is all."
Yeah, it's got its premise at the beginning, is that like that film and that book by James M. Cain, but then of course we have our own twists and turns, no one can trust the fact that they know the source material in my pieces. They can't go, "Oh, we've seen the film," or "We know the story," because it's always changed, and there's always twists, and there's always other elements. As there's a big one in the Carman, which of course wouldn't have even been allowed when the book was written.
I know the bit you mean. So the other thing which you also just talked about there is your love of dance history, and so when you went for the interview at Laban, you were able to reel off all of this information, and that also comes through in the Red Shoes, of course, because this is really based on the Ballets Russes and the Diaghilev.
Yeah.
And, but also in the way you construct some of the dances within your performances.
Little ballets within the
they're always
whole piece.
Quite accurate. In terms of time, and it shows that you are really fascinated by it, particularly that era.
Yeah, I think so, and I did I went through a period when I was thinking about doing the Red Shoes where I thought, are we the company to do it? We're not really a ballet company. We're not a ballet company. We very rarely do anything on point. It's not something that I do, and it's about a ballet company. But actually, when I looked at historically, those companies experimented with all kinds of dance, and the great choreographers worked in different forms, experimented with bare feet sometimes, different kinds of shoes, different kinds of, it wasn't always on point. And the dancers were a real mix of people, like New Adventures is, a mix of different kinds of training. Any man, not that my men are not this, but any man who could breathe and swing a leg was in those companies in those days. I wouldn't say that about my dancers, of course, but there was a real mix of ability and dancers training there. So I thought, oh no, we are the right company to do it. We can do all those styles. But it's funny, I was watching it the other night with Patricia Kelly, Gene Kelly's wife. And at the end of it, I had to say to her, look, I suddenly saw so much of him in it, in the Red Shoes ballet. It's like one of those ballets within a film that Gene used to do, and the style of it, even to the way the men are dressed a little bit. So there's a bit of MGM in there as well, MGM musicals, as well as all the ballet history, and then a bit of English music hall as well, with the tacky sort of music hall that she ends up performing in. So the dancers have to be incredibly versatile with all these different styles. And we even actually attempt social dance of the 1940s in it, with a bit of swing dance at the company party. So it is a bit of everything.
So the other thing that happens in Red Shoes is that we see the creative process. So there's a moment where everyone's gathered around the composer, the designer, or gathered around the set, and the choreographer's trying to just starting to make movement. And I thought, is that actually what happens? It was a kind of pastiche of what you expect it to be, and all this discussion going on. But I thought it led me to think, well, actually, how does it work, right, in your situation? And so perhaps you could just talk about the process. So, working with the designer and how those things start to emerge.
Yes, well, like we do because it was a piece about creating work, creating ballet, and creating something new. I wanted to have that as part of the show, and that's one of the hardest scenes actually to make, was that scene with all the creative team all together, all feeding into the ideas. Of course, it doesn't really happen like that. But I'm glad we do it in the show, to show there's that side of putting on a show.
Do you think it happened like that then, though?
I don't know. I wonder. I would love to think they all sat in a room.
That's what I think.
Came up with ideas. All those famous artists and composers and people. I certainly do it in stages. How I would work. I initially start with myself with an idea, often what I would call the big idea. What is it about that piece that it's putting together something quite famous, but with a take on it? What is that take going to be? Is it an era thing, or is it a change of sex, or is it whatever it might be? And try and think through a story, write a story down, the beginnings of a story anyway. And then the next person I would talk to would be usually Les Brotherston, regular designer. If it's a new score, I've often worked with Terry Davis, that would be an important person to start talking about it from the beginning. But if it's an existing score, it would just be Les, and and then give him the chance to respond to it, not tell him what I want, not say this, I want this, and this, I want this scene, let him then bring his magic to it and go like, what about this? And of course, the genius of his design for the Red Shoes is the spinning, ever turning cross arch, which is an incredible piece.
It's part of the storytelling, isn't it?
To play with it. It's almost like a dancer sometimes, and I wouldn't have come up with that idea. I knew it was backstage, front of house, that we knew there was a concept that we were trying to get across, but that's his job, and that's what he does. And then you work with other people on different aspects. I'm a really firm believer on letting people do what they do really well, let them have the chance to do it, and offer that. And true, I eventually have the final say to say yes or no on something, but I think I don't have all the answers. My team feeds in enormously, and so do the dancers as well. Eventually they'll be feeding in ideas as well and helping to create movement. So it's incredibly collaborative.
Where do you start? I mean, you have to make a choreography, but you also have to continue to tell a story, right?
Yes.
And so I just wondered how you actually make movement, and what happens in the studio. Are you showing? Are you? Some people ask to suggest things to dancers. What's your sort of process?
Well, it's evolved over a long period of time, and it started out as most people think is what happens, is you work it out in front of a mirror yourself, and then you teach it to people. And it certainly started out that way from even before I went to college. I was doing that kind of thing, and I thought that was my job, was to make up the movement on my own body and teach it to people. And so most of my early shows, some of which we still do, the very early stuff, I did a lot of it on my own body and created the movement. Then I get a bit older, of course, and you can't do so much. Then I start to work with really brilliant dancers that are better than me, much better than me. And I'm not going to rely solely on what I can do. But by this point, I'm not dancing in the pieces as well, which is usually what was happening in the early work. I'm stepping back and I can watch, so I can start to shape movement with the people I'm working with. And the job becomes more about giving them the knowledge of what I want, in terms of the story and where the scene is going to go. We look at it as a scene rather than a dance. This scene has got to tell us this. And then set tasks, very basic tasks sometimes, around the idea of what we want to get across in the scene. I like to set tasks that are clear for the dancers to understand, oh yes, we can do that, rather than worrying about what they're doing. Very straightforward things. I mean, I can give you one example. In the Red Shoes, actually, with a duet we called Cheap Digs, which is where Vicky Page and her partner, Julian Craster, the composer, are together in a cheap bedsit. Well, that looks quite posh, actually, in the show, but it's supposed to be Cheap Digs. and they're both missing what it is they do, which is dancing, great work, and him composing for great company and great, so we set this task which was all about hands and feet. So there's one section of it which is all about his hands, her pulling his hands away from composing or the piano or whatever. Really simple physical idea to play with. How many ways can you do that? And then the second part is about him stopping her from dancing, or she thinks he's had stopped her from having the opportunity to dance. So it's about him grabbing her feet and stopping her from dancing. It's so simple. It's a simple idea, but it's something that everyone can play with, that idea. And then out of that grows some interesting movement and some ideas that then feel right for what we're trying to say. And then you start to elaborate on that and work through the music and make it work for the music. So it's sort of there's various ways of doing it, but it's about task setting and working together and discussing and finding it together now.
So it sounds like the music comes in a little bit later once you've started.
It does
to
a
make
bit
some
now.
material.
Yeah, I don't think it's absolutely, but I think I'm quite good at putting things to music. I mean, I do pride myself on. I don't ever do anything that just goes across lots of music. I listen. I know the music inside out. It's the script for me. It's the script of what I'm doing, and everything is set and counted and exactly set to the music. There's no sort of leeway there. It's musical.
Yeah,
has to be.
Yeah. So as I say, you have this choreography going on, but always, and I noticed it even more just watching Red Shoes again. There's something happening which is moving the story forward.
Yeah.
And so I don't know when that comes in. So you have a kind of script in your head in terms of moving that narrative.
Yeah.
And that sort of keeps going all through every scene.
I'm very organised in the structure of an evening. That's I think one of the things that makes people talk about storytelling when they see our work and New Ventures work, because it's very much worked out, and it's also in a way, I hate to use the word manipulative, but sometimes I put in something just to lighten the story for a while, then go a bit darker so people feel the difference. I know that the evening has to be made up from solos, duets, trios, group dances. I need to use the ensemble really well and make sure they're busy all the time. I don't like people sitting in dressing rooms. It's a little calculated in a way, the structure of it. And I think very much about the arc of an evening and the arc of a first half, and that you must finish on a big up question mark. What's going to happen next? Feeling. So people want to come back after the interval.
This is all experience from you watching musicals and isn't it?
It is, and it's storytelling, and it's all those things, it's about momentum. And I should mention that I've had the great experience of working in musical theatre with some really great directors who I learnt a lot from, like Trevor Nunn and Richard Eyre and Sam Mendes, and I've had a great experience working with those quite senior directors, and that's what it's all about. It's all about rhythm. It's all about the rhythm of an evening, and don't letting the ball drop, and keeping the audience with you. And so all that theatrical know-how is part of what we do at New Ventures, I think.
Yeah. So just moving on to the next kind of theme, which is an obvious one with you, is taking some of the texts of ballet, so the Nutcrackers and the Swan Lakes, etc. The first one actually was Nutcracker, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was a commission from Opera North. It was half of an evening.
Yes. Well, I'd never have decided to do Nutcracker myself. I mean, there was only 6 of us in the company at the time, and I was one of the dancers, so we'd never thought, we're going to do Nutcracker. So we needed the commission to have the opportunity, and we were able to expand numbers to do it and have a full orchestra, Opera North's orchestra. And it's interesting that what kicked all this off really was that commission to be different, because they didn't want a classical version. They thought, if we're going to commission as an opera company, a dance company, to do Nutcracker, so they could recreate this program in which it was originally premiered with this opera called Yolande by Tchaikovsky, and they were originally done as a double bill. It was the centenary, and they wanted to recreate this thing, and they came to me. They'd seen some of our fairly quirky work, I suppose, funny, it had humour in it, which was unusual at the time in dance. The brief was to do something different with Nutcracker. Do your own version. Don't, there are plenty out there. You do something different. So that was a lovely commission.
Yeah.
To get and to be encouraged to do something different.
Can you remember who it was who came and commissioned you, the person?
Yeah, it was Nicholas Payne.
Wow, yes.
Nicholas Payne has been associated here at Sadler's Wells at times as well. Yeah,
yes.
It was the commissioner. Yeah, and
Amazing.
Martin Duncan I worked with as director on the double bill, and he directed the opera and co-directed the original Nutcracker that we did.
It's interesting. These moments really are so important, aren't they?
Yes.
Because if you hadn't had that chance, you wouldn't maybe have had the ambition to go and do Swan Lake.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
No, it was only the sort of the modest success of Nutcracker at the Edinburgh Festival, which is where it was premiered, and a bit of encouragement on that Arts Council gave us the possibility of doing another one, and it was a project. Swan Lake was the one I chose, and it was a project to get bigger again for a period of time and a bit of touring and to play here at Sadler's Wells, and then we'd go back to being the small company again. It was a definitely a limited period of time we had to, and a lot of money. I mean, the trust was incredible when I think back now.
It must have been. I mean, the sets were quite,
full enormous sets, a full orchestra with a great Tchaikovsky conductor, David Lloyd-Jones, and we had, there was a lot of faith put in me, which I so appreciate now when I think back. But it was supposed to be for a short time.
Yeah, and look at it now.
A few months.
So, so obviously what links a lot of these ballets is Tchaikovsky.
Yes.
And I do wonder sometimes if these ballets would still exist and have their strength if it wasn't for the music.
They wouldn't. They wouldn't, Alistair. I promise you that it's the music. Because the choreography changes in them quite a lot. All these productions that you mentioned of Sleeping Beauty and Swan Lake and Nutcracker, they're all a bit different. There's some bits that remain similar. It's the music which makes the public love the pieces. And, I think that's Tchaikovsky is the king of ballet, really.
Yeah, of course. And I guess in there is always a scenario, and you change it a little bit. But
yes.
But ultimately, there is a path that he's laid out.
Well, the fascination was with Nutcracker and then Swan Lake and then Sleeping Beauty is that they were written to order with the choreographers Petipa and Ivanov, but they requested what they wanted and gave some sort of guidelines as to what that section of the show was about. I should call it ballet, shouldn't I? I always call my shows. But it was music written to tell a story, and that's what was fascinating, and that's what was so good, and why I feel confident when I go have that kind of a score, that I can find a different story in it, because it's dramatic music, and also extremely melodic and easy to choreograph to. It's just a joy to choreograph to.
And just tell us about this Swan Lake, the first. You did it here first, and then you went into the West End, didn't you?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, really, because it's a moment in time which seemed incredible, which was incredible, but also quite difficult. And we had an incredible, unexpected success with the show. It became sort of headline news rather than just arts news, and the image of the swan, we had underestimated what that meant in the arts world. A different kind of swan was a sort of major thing, and then we had all these opportunities given to us to do a West End run, and that was the first incredible thing that happened, but also it was very hard work. We didn't have enough covers. We didn't have enough people in the company. It was a struggle every day to get the show on. No dancer at that time was used to doing 8 shows a week.
That's right.
Nobody. Yeah. I mean, these were all contemporary, mainly contemporary dancers rather than ballet dancers as well. And ballet dancers do even less, and still do. You know, so it wasn't till through the doing of it that we learned how to do 7 or 8 shows a week, which we do all the time now, and look after people and have rotating casts and physios on tap, and you know, we really look after people and make sure that they're okay, and that's how we managed to do all these shows. But then we didn't have that knowledge. So it had its ups and downs for a while.
But it was really trailblazing then, wasn't it? Not just in terms of what it was because it's a classic, obviously, but also that you were going into this new world of dance in the West End, 8 shows a week, as you say. It's all and no one else had done it, and you were finding out as you went along.
Yeah, it was new territory, you know, for all of us. And of course, when that happens, you don't always get it right. And I don't want to downplay. I don't want to make it sound grim and everything. It's always been an amazing thing, the fact that we did that, and then got invited to Los Angeles, and then eventually to Broadway, and all these things. You know, it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and we were always lifted up by the audience every night. The show has never not got the reception it gets. Even when I sit through what I think is not a great performance, it's also the same at the end, and it's uplifting, and that helped us work out how to do it in a way.
Yeah. Can I just turn to the dancers for a minute and ask you when you're auditioning, or you know, you have people obviously who've been with you for a while, but when you're looking for new dancers, what is it you're looking for in a? Because you must have many people coming. We
do now. I mean, we struggled to find 14 swans originally when we first did Swan Lake, but we do have a lot of applications now. But also, because the work is more well known, it's nurtured a generation of dancers who want to be in this company, and they think it's them. They see themselves in it, in the shows. You know, so we get people who are already informed about what kind of work this is. And they tend to be people who love performing and love telling a story to an audience, and so it's a little easier in some ways now, because you haven't got to explain what it is you want from people. But they're not trained actors mostly, so you have to find that within people. You have to find a generosity of spirit when they're performing, that they want to give to an audience, so they want to express something to an audience, and that's very important to me and to the shows. The other thing is, if you're telling stories, and usually a sense of community or a town or a place or something, you can't have everyone looking the same. People have to look different. There has to be a sense of a community, a range of everything, shapes, sizes, you know, background, diversity of all kinds, ages. You have to have an older dancer to play the parents of someone, and you know, so it's not the same as casting or as auditioning for an ordinary dance company. It's about all those elements that make it look like a world in which the piece is created, you know, and that you want the audience to see. So that's quite unusual in a way for dance. It's about finding all those characters. There's an element of eccentricity about the people in my company. There's quite a lot of quite eccentric people, which I love and encourage that. That's how you get interesting performances, you know, from people. And I love that. And they're all very, very different. So there's no one thing you're looking for, really.
Yes, and of course now you have dancers who have been with you for a while, and they move into these older characters, and which you need in the production. But it's a lovely thing, isn't it? As well as people, you know, I always think that people move out of dance too quickly. But some of your dancers have been with you for a long time, you know, and they really feel that they're, you know, that they look their age, but they're dancing beautifully.
Yes, still. To have that opportunity to play a role which is right for you. I mean, I think some dancers of the past probably had to go on playing Juliet till they were in their 40s, and it still happens, of course. And you know, but it's nice to have roles that feel age appropriate. And I find it a mixture in a company of mature dancers with experience and college leavers and first job people making their professional debuts. Wonderful mix because they all learn from each other. And you've got the work ethic of the dancers who've been there for a while, which everyone sees and is inspired by, and also the energy that the young people bring and that keep everyone on their toes a little bit as well. It's lovely. It's a lovely mix.
And I have to ask you about how, because obviously we've been through COVID and everything, but how are the dancers different in their, how you work with them? I mean, the younger generation have definitely changed anyway, so that must come into the studio.
Well, I feel so much for those dancers that whose training was affected, by COVID. But this group of young people that we've taken into Red Shoes this time are the first group where they've not been affected by COVID in their training, and they are very different. And they're really open. They're really happy to work with each other, and they look you in the eye. You can have fun with them. It's extraordinary to see the difference. The last few years have been more of a struggle to get people engaged, to get people to be happy to work with each other because they've not had that experience so much. There's a reticence there, and I think, and I only feel sad about that, and hopefully people can get out beyond that through professional work. But it's hopefully that will never happen again.
Yeah, sure. So talking about the future and what's next, Matthew? We're waiting.
I know. I'm boringly content with what I've done. I think that's probably it feels good to me, but it's probably a bit boring for other people to hear that. Because the amazing thing about having a company is that I've been able to do the work I wanted to do, and some of the things that have been on a wish list, I guess, I've ticked off, and done those pieces. So that I haven't got this sort of burning ambition to do a particular piece I've never been able to manage to pull off. So there's that, and I do get a lot of pleasure from the revivals, and making the work better. And by the time they come back after 5, 6, 7 years, sometimes I'm all excited about them again, as I was in the first place. But this year I've had a busy year doing things outside of the company. We're doing Oliver in the West End, and that was in Chichester as well, and the Sondheim show Old Friends. We're taking up quite a lot of my time in the last couple of years, and I haven't had much spare time. So what I'm doing at the moment is just sort of gently looking for an idea, and hopefully it might come.
How enticing.
So we'll see, and if anyone's got any great ideas, then
there's usually plenty of them that come in when they hear.
But Alistair, I don't think it will be a big piece. It will be more of an intimate piece along the lines of Midnight Bell, or working with people I really love working with closely. And I think at my age now, I feel that's the kind of work that I will enjoy doing, and working closely with people.
Yeah, I understand that, but I was thinking about the Red Shoes again, and I remember coming down to Plymouth to see the opening and everything. There's something very special, isn't there, about a new show, that sort of excitement, that struggle actually to get there. And I mean, that's quite, that must be something you want to relive at some point.
I think when I'm ready for it, it will happen naturally, and but it be more like, I think there's a great idea.
Yeah,
it has to be. It's not just because I feel I should do a new piece. It will be because there's a great idea, and I think, I really think I could do something with that. That's going to be great. Yeah. I have to feel that. Yeah. Otherwise, it may never happen. Yeah. But when it happens, it starts with a great idea.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, we'll enjoy all of the existing work, and so thank you very much for doing this conversation.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Alistair.